Hello, everybody. We are back from our delayed hiatus or small break thing.
November break.
Yeah, our November break, and we are beginning our holiday season on the
That's
podcast
right.
where we ask the question, "Hey, remember the Aughts?"
A lot of people seem to right now.
Yeah, I feel like since our November break, it's just come up even more and more and more. And we talk about everything from the 2000s on this podcast from Limited to Justice. I think that was the other, like, teeny bopper shop.
I was going to bring up shops. I'm going to bring up, do you remember when Hot Topic had the crazy, like, gateway entrance?
Oh, yeah, and it looked like a burnt down forest.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they just did a documentary on this, Van Dutch, which I didn't own any Van Dutch.
No.
I just remember Van Dutch.
Yeah.
No, Von Dutch. What the I'm the worst. But today we're introducing a new host to this podcast. Brought him on for his expertise on our series for the pre-MCU movies. And let us introduce our friend Yonel.
Yonel!
Hey!
Yes.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
We've been talking about having Yonel on this podcast, like, basically since its inception.
Yes.
Aww.
We love Yonel.
Aww, thank you.
And we had mentioned throwing around, like, pre-MCU movies even back then, and you expressed interest in those movies. So once we decided to do it for this holiday season, we were like, all right, let's do it.
It's time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's time.
Not everyone is meant to make a difference. But for me, the choice to live an ordinary life is no longer an option.
Awesome.
I guess so. Yeah, let's get started. Where do you guys want to start?
Well, would you like to say anything about yourself, your socials, or anything you want to promote?
Nothing I gotta promote, but I don't know, I'm an artist that man, a big comic book fan ever since I was I had to be like 7 or 8. Started off with a Superman comic, and as I got into my teenage years, evolved into like Spider-Man, especially Ultimate Spider-Man, Thor, and just full blown Marvel. And so it's really crazy how something that kind of was niche has become so mainstream. And this movie was one of my favorites. You guys have no idea how many times I watched this on bootleg when it first came out. Oh my goodness! Yeah, this one helped define my my teenage years. I was a freshman when it came out.
Yonel, were you more of a DC fan or a Marvel fan?
When I was a kid, probably up until I was maybe 10, I was more DC because that was mainly my comic books. I used to get comic books from like the local supermarket. But when I got into my teenage years, with the introduction of Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man, I got really into it because, there's a little backstory on that comic book series. It kind of like a retelling of the Spider-Man origin through 2000s kind of look or feel to it, and it was very, very relatable. So that really got me full blown back into Marvel, and that evolved into Thor, X-Men, the whole Marvel universe.
I read in college that the Ultimate Spider-Man run. My friend Eli, he handed me a copy of the omnibus for Ultimate Spider-Man. And it was like you kind of just get sucked in. Like the artwork's incredible, and just like we all know the Spider-Man story, but it was really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great modern retelling. It took liberties with different characters that were really established, like the Green Goblin and Doc Ock. That were received very. They had very mixed reviews, but
Hmm.
man, that comic book series inspired me to do my own comic book, and draw even more in high school. Yeah, that's a good series. That's a great starting off point for anyone looking to get into
Aw.
comic books for the first time.
Yeah, 100%. And like, and not only that, but like the Ultimate Universe. Like, if I'm correct, you can correct me on this. The Ultimate Universe doesn't exist anymore. It kind of got eaten. But a lot of
Yeah,
those
yeah.
characters, like a lot of those staple characters from the Ultimate Universe, are now regulars in the regular universe.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest characters to leave from the Ultimate Universe is Miles Morales, Spider-Man,
Yep, yep.
and so they figured out a way to integrate him into the Marvel 616 universe, the mainstream Marvel universe.
Hmm.
So that series had a lot of great ideas and great interpretations of classic characters that they figured, what, let's put this character into the mainstream universe because this is too good to just let it die in the Ultimate Universe.
Hmm. Yeah, when I was a kid, I definitely was more of a DC fan, and part of that was I would watch the Batman animated series and like Teen Titans with my dad, and he had a lot of like DC comic books that I've taken on. But for some reason, like Spider-Man felt different, you know? Like he always liked the DC characters because he felt like they were more relatable, but there's something just universally relatable about a kid from Queens who, wants to help his family and just goof around and also like save New York City.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was
So,
also like the fact that he was from Forest Hills. I knew Forest Hills. I mean, a lot of these superhero stories take place in New York City, but that one kid from Queens, Forest Hills, I know where Forest Hills is. It just felt a little bit more relatable. Felt a little bit more. Oh, this is my guy, you know.
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, it's more approachable and more accessible.
even when I was
Yeah,
watching, when we were going to talk about the first movie, there's locations I very much recognize from like Kew Gardens, Forest Hills, Queens Boulevard.
hmm,
Yeah.
Like I'll say this, even the Tom Holland ones use a lot more Queens. I mean, I haven't seen it since, but the Amazing Spider-Mans, they felt maybe too pretty. It felt very, Manhattan-y. I don't know. I could be
yeah,
wrong.
I don't even think it felt Manhattan-y. It felt like a sound stage in California. You
Yeah,
know, I
yeah,
think that they did shoot in New York, but it's still very much like you're saying, the production quality definitely feels more like a big budget
yeah.
Hollywood LA film, and maybe that's what they felt like they needed to go in. Like maybe that's the direction they felt like they needed to go in to separate themselves from the original trilogy. Um, but I don't think that it really worked in the way that they wanted it to. I
No,
think it just made it even less relatable.
there's a
yeah. The
lot.
city just seemed like a setting rather than an actual character itself in those movies.
Yeah. But I mean, like, do we want to talk about too, like, how old we were when we saw this movie? Like,
Yes,
did we go see it in the movie theater? What were we thinking when this movie came out as kids?
yes.
Okay, cool.
If I can start, I remember it came out in 2002, so we had just entered, Courtney and I, we just started middle school, like sixth
That's
grade.
right. That's right.
And I actually didn't see the first one in theaters.
Oh, you didn't?
No, it was I saw the second one in theaters. But
Okay.
I saw the first one on home release and just fell in love with it. Like I didn't what's weird is that like we were talking about Spider-Man being this universal hero, and that's that goes not only like that holds really true, and you see it even with the toy sales. Spider-Man alone by far is the most profitable superhero of all time, being
Mm-hmm.
like only being second to like no, not second, followed up by Batman, but even like Batman's merch sales don't even compare to Spider-Man. I think it
Mm.
goes Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman, and then everybody else. But I remember when I saw this, it blew my mind. I'll always remember this was a funny bit for me. Like the stereotype for young boys, especially in like the late 90s, was like to have like women posters in their room, something from like a Sports Illustrated. And I'll never forget my cousin in his bedroom above his bed on the ceiling had a life-size poster of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And I'll never forget that.
Was it the one with the Twin Towers in the reflection?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
That's gonna be talked about today because this movie is such a perfect time capsule of that time and like
Absolutely.
all the things that came out around it. Like, do we even want to? Well, why don't you guys talk about where you were when this came out? Like, did you see? I'm Yonel. You had to see this in the theater, right?
No.
Oh, you
So
didn't?
No.
my no.
Just the bootleg.
Yeah, it was a bootleg, and I don't know why we didn't. I think the parents are very conservative, and so they didn't want me going to movie theaters, even at the age of 13, which was weird, but that's beside the point. But my dad got the bootleg because I begged him because I wanted to see it so bad, and he got the bootleg, and it was like so bad. Right, because I saw it maybe a couple of years ago. I'm like, I watched this so many times, right? Looking back on it, but I was that was my first year in high school. Yeah,
Hmm.
freshman in high school, and everyone already knew me as like a comic book geek or whatever. And people were constantly asking, "Did you watch it? Did you watch it?" I remember one guy kind of confronting me in the hallway, saying, "I'm just surprised you haven't watched it yet."
Oh
Right?
my
Because at that point,
goodness.
my dad needed time to get the bootleg, and he didn't record it himself. I think he got it from a friend. So it's just like, wow.
I
Of
love
course,
how
I don't condone it, but
they
it's
were
just
too
like,
conservative to take you to the movie theater for you to go to the movie theater, but the bootleg is okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's
like
just like, actually, we could avoid a potential crime
yeah,
by just
yeah.
watching it in the movie theaters. But yeah, that movie, oh my God, it was such a great positive starting point for, I don't know, me being a teenager. It was, oh, you guys have no idea how much I watched that movie and how much I tried to copy it in the comic books I would try to create. It was such a defining moment for me when I was a teenager.
I mean, what is really cool about the film is I feel like it definitely doesn't shy away from the comic book aspect of it. And even when they do the sewing montage, which is so funny to me now, the illustrations that he does for his costume are very comic booky.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that like when this movie came out, we went as a family, and it's so funny how I haven't seen this movie in a very long time, but even just watching it today, and I would say that this is the most janky version of watching it. I watched it on YouTube for free, and it was just like the 5 minute bits, and then it would go to another episode, and it was just the next 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes. Um, but it kind of felt like I was just watching a movie with commercials.
Yeah.
Um, Even watching it now, I could remember the exact moments in the movie theater where I got scared and couldn't like look at
Oh
the
yeah.
screen. So it was like the spider bite, the times where like the Green Goblin would sort of like flash before his eyes. Now
Yeah.
I think that's just hilarious because it's like ooga booga booga.
Well, like that's
Exactly.
like I noticed that rewatching these, like
Yeah.
Sam Raimi's horror inspiration really does pull through. Like even in the second
Okay.
one, there's that famous scene, but like I remember in this movie, like even the fight that the Green Goblin and Spider-Man have towards the end, it's a brutal fight that's just visceral
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
you
It
feel
was
like Tobey
real.
Maguire is really getting the shit kicked out of him.
Like when he hits his face against those bricks, I feel it. There is a
Yeah.
weight to it, you know?
It was brutal. I was comparing it to like some of the stuff you see in like the Tom Holland version, and I'm like, this just seems like a straight beat down from
Yeah.
Yeah.
the Green Goblin. I'm like, geez, this is
Right.
vicious.
Like first he gets like an explosion to the face,
Exactly.
and then he gets pushed through like broken glass, and then he lands on a pile of bricks and gets hit in the face. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
that I think that proves the sort of resiliency that the spider bite has given him, because it would be just dead if it was a
Exactly.
normal person.
Been destroyed.
Yeah.
I love that flying kick that the Green Goblin did though. That was for me that was cheesy, but I loved it when he was beating him down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. There was definitely like a variety of good graphics and really awkwardly bad graphics.
Hmm.
And then there were just these little moments of 2000s charm, like when they're in Times Square and there's a big Singular advertisement. I'm like, Singular doesn't exist anymore.
I know,
No.
right?
Okay, should we get into like the beginning of the film, or do you want to start with facts, Tom?
Oh, I could do facts.
Let's do facts.
Let's do facts.
Okay.
Fun fact, did you know they've been trying to make this movie since the 90s?
That makes sense to me.
They were
Yeah.
trying to make this movie for a very long time, and originally was attached to James Cameron.
Oh.
James Cameron
I
was
heard that.
originally supposed to do it, and Leonardo DiCaprio was his top billing, but there was a few other people
course
who wanted
it
to be
was.
Spider-Man. Do you know anyone? Some of the other names?
I think the only other person I know is Jake Gyllenhaal.
I was going to say Jake
Um,
Gyllenhaal, yeah. Who dated
but I-
Kirsten Dunst for a long time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's all I know. I'm curious to see who else. Like 'cause
Well-
Leonardo DiCaprio is such a
Yeah.
I don't know, that would have been
I found
that
out
was
this
a good
funny
casting.
tidbit in the 90s, while it was still technically being worked on by James Cameron, a certain Michael Jackson was very interested in pursuing the role to Peter Parker. Like, he actively
Interesting.
really pushed to be Spider-Man. Apparently that's his favorite superhero.
I do love the nerdiness that does come out of celebrities when their favorite superhero is up for grabs. Like,
Yeah.
you will just find this like unabashed quality from these big figures and these big names when their favorite superhero is up for grabs. That's really bizarre. That would be such a bizarre Spider-Man.
Yeah, that would have been that would have been wild.
I do think that Tobey Maguire kind of like fits the build for Peter
Yeah.
Parker. I've never met anyone who can simultaneously look 40 and 12 at the exact same time.
Oh my god. All right.
Like, he looks so old. At the same time, he looks like a child.
He's a weird one, honestly. And I did kind of laugh because I'm so used to, like, we see more age appropriate casting currently. So
Mhm.
like it was a little jarring in the opening scene when like you see a clearly 30-year-old man chasing after a school bus.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he's only just 40 something now. But even as a kid in the movie theater, I was like, they're just pretending to be high schoolers, right? These people look legitimately old. And I think because we've known Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst in movies for a long time, it was easy for us to not believe that they were actually teenagers. I think at this point, like, James Franco was only the really newbie,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah.
Where it was really jarring was I forgot the guy that plays Flash Thompson, Joe.
Oh, Joe Manganiello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this man is way too old to be in high school right now, beating up on this other 40-year-old dude. For me, it was kind of jarring watching him. Like, first of all, this guy is huge, and
Yep.
it's just like, you got 5 o'clock shadow. What's going on?
But
Actually,
also,
I
like,
have
his voice is so high then, too.
Yeah.
Like, he's still this, like, 40-year-old man, and he's like, Peter Parker!
I have a funny story about him actually. Did you guys hear this?
Hmm.
He has revealed recently that on the set there was a lot of rumors that Tom Maguire was kind of a handful.
Yeah.
Mm.
So apparently the crew of the movie offered Joe $100 to by accidentally hit Tom Maguire during the fight scene.
Oh my gosh.
Really?
Yeah, they literally apparently like somebody came up to him and was like, "We'll give you a couple $100 if you just hit Tom Maguire." And he looked over at the sound guy, and the sound guy just gave him a look like, "Are you gonna do it?" And he decided against it because he's like, I'm gonna ruin my Hollywood career by breaking Spider-Man's
Aw.
nose.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he didn't really hit it big until, I'm gonna say, Magic Mike. Like, I know he was in things before that, like True
Yeah.
Blood, but I think it was Magic Mike that made people think, like, wait, who is this guy? And then his relationship with Sofia Vergara became a really big deal because it's just like, right,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's
there's
right.
two beautiful, good-looking people, right? Okay,
Yeah.
they deserve each other, you know. What does Tobey Maguire being a handful mean?
He was just
Apparently, he's like
apparently,
a jerk. I've heard.
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh, interesting. Huh?
He also has a very severe gambling addiction.
Really?
Yeah,
There's a-
it was. I don't know if you're gonna go into the time of that movie.
Go
with,
ahead, you do, yeah, because I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. I think it had Jessica Chastain in it. She
And Michael
plays, like, this-
Cera.
plays this dealer or this person that arranges these like high stakes poker games across I don't know, across the country or across New York City. And there's a character that's like this Hollywood type, played by Michael Cera, who's like an obsessive gambler.
Huh?
Right, and I don't know everything about it, but that's supposedly supposed to be Tobey Maguire because it's based off of a book, which is based off of a true story.
Really? Is it
Yeah.
Molly's Game?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that it had to do with Tobey Maguire. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that was he was at Michael Cera's character.
Player X. Oh, that's so interesting. Somebody who it's funny because when we've been watching Spider-Man, I keep ending up making connections to Topher Grace. Because Octavia Spencer makes an appearance in this movie. And she is in a movie that I watched as a kid called Win a Date with Tad Hamilton. And Topher Grace is in that movie. But also, when you mentioned gambling, I just remembered there's a scene early on in Ocean's 11 where they're teaching celebrities how to play poker. And Topher Grace improvises the scene where he's just like, "Looky here, guys, all reds." And that was like his only line really in the movie. And then that's it. Like he plays Topher Grace, but then he's not in any more of the movie.
That's wild.
And then Topher Grace comes into Spider-Man 3. And they mention Eddie in this one, which surprised me.
You actually messaged me about that, and you would ask, was this something that they had planned? And I think you can correct me, but otherwise, I don't think it was a plan. I think it was just an Easter egg. Sam Raimi is not a fan of the Venom character.
See, that's so funny to me because, like, I loved Venom when I was a kid.
Venom.
I do. And I will stand by the Venom movie. I don't care how messy it is. It's a good movie.
Go get him, Venom!
I got that Venom.
And Woody Harrelson in the second one is Carnage. Excellent casting.
Oh my god, I can't take myself. Like, Venom's one of my favorite villains. Like probably my favorite Spider-Man villain.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite anti-heroes. So just seeing I'm like, man, it is so easy to do this character story in Spider-Man. Why can't they get this right? Why is Tom Hardy for me, it's like a trigger. Like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing one of my favorite characters just being like, I mean, outside of that, like if I take myself out of it and enjoy the movie, I'm like, it's kind of ridiculous, but I also kind of like it. Like that whole scene.
Joe and I went into it with not a lot of expectation. We just knew that Tom Hardy really brought a lot to the role.
Yeah.
And we were like, this is a mess and we love it. This is a hot mess that we love and I want more of it. And same way that I love Transformers, I'm like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have to say, at least this is I think the look of Venom is great. The look is great, and I think Tom Hardy brings a lot to it. It just felt kind of weird to me, although let's see what happens now, because apparently Venom is now got Doctor Strange into the other universe.
Wait, so is he gonna be in the new one?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know.
I mean, I am really sick of the MCU, but I'm very excited for the new Spider-Man because it definitely plays on the nostalgia for these movies that we're talking about.
Yes,
right,
that was part of the inspiration. We need to talk about Spider-Man as Spider-Man's coming up. Also,
Um,
I kind of want to
mhm,
say,
mhm.
I know you're sick of it, but personally, I still like the MCU. But I also feel like anytime Doctor Strange is in something, it becomes infinitely better.
Yeah,
I
I do really
really
like
like.
love
Benedict
Doctor.
Cumberbatch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I-
I think with him in it, it's going to be. Yeah, everyone's looking forward to it, and
yeah.
his second movie.
And I feel like Benedict Cumberbatch is such a like larger than life celebrity at this point. So I sort of like the snarkiness that comes with Doctor Strange.
mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's very fitting for the comedy of Peter Parker. Because Peter Parker always is like a little bit he has a little bit of that like wry comedy. Uh so I like that Doctor Strange is gonna be paired with it. That feels much more obtainable to me as a movie I'd watch rather than Iron Man being in it in the previous ones.
Yeah, it always feels weird having him as kind of the mentor
Yeah.
to Spider-Man. Like for me, I'm just like, well, that's not like that. They have two different personalities. They're not really mentors in the comic books except for one storyline. But
Mm,
I was like, all right, this is its own adaptation. I have to
Yeah.
see where they take it.
yeah. Now I have more of an interest in watching the MCU Spider-Man movies. Um,
Spider-Man.
yeah. I didn't have any interest in Eternals, but I do want to watch Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi was
Oh,
very good, and
yes,
Eternals, I liked it more than most people. And I think
I
Really?
haven't watched it yet.
Okay.
okay, I will say this, the first 20 minutes are really bad because the first 20 minutes is trying to explain like a new religion to a bunch of people who don't care about religion because that's what it is. Like Eternals is kind of like its own mythology and lore that it originally was created outside the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
But the movie, so the first 20 minutes is kind of hard, but once you get the plot and once they're like we have a goal to achieve, it's actually I really dug it. Like it was really cool. Also shot like really well. Like it was a lot of locations and these large like wide scale images and just the grand scale of the celestials. It was I
Hmm.
had a great time. I had a great time with it.
I think part of it is that like it's a whole new group of people
right.
and now suddenly fans have to grow an attachment and an introduction and an exposition of all of these new characters. But it's different than how that worked for Guardians of the Galaxy. One, Guardians of the Galaxy has way fewer people, and also they're incredibly flawed. All these Eternals, they're eternal. They are basically gods. I am not concerned for their safety. I know one
Right.
or something happens to one or two of them, right? But like I feel like the Guardians can be killed and they're very flawed. So therefore I am interested in their mishaps and their growth.
They're
And
They're
more
then
also
relatable.
they're
yeah,
also kind
exactly.
of dumb. They're also I would say half the
Yeah, they're
team
kind of
is
stupid.
very dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, most of the team is very dumb except for Gamora.
Right. And then she's
Yeah.
just mad that she's the smartest person there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What I think is a
mhm,
good line from like Guardians that really kind of gets the theme and makes it relatable to me
mhm,
is I think Rocket says, "Why do you want to save the universe?" And it's like Peter Quills because I'm one of the people that live in it, and for me,
yeah,
I'm like that makes sense,
that
and I
is
can
the
imagine
most
in it. Yeah, I can
reasonable
imagine in it
reason.
exactly, and I can imagine in Eternals that they have to save the universe because they're gods or whatever, and that's cool, but that's not really relatable to you and me. It's just like, yeah, I
Yeah,
want to save the world because this is the only place I can live, right?
right,
So
exactly.
I think that's like I think a huge. No, granted, I didn't see it yet, but I that's like the vibe I kind of got from. I don't know anything about the
I
Eternals, but
I will say there is a twist to the Eternals that I thought was pretty clever,
okay,
and it does borrow from the original Jim Starlin vision. No, Jack Kirby. Sorry, Jack Kirby's vision. Because I read
Mhm,
the in the omnibus for the original Eternals like years ago.
mhm.
But yeah, there's a twist there. But
Is
guys, we
it
gotta
is
go
it
back.
is it the Harry
What's up?
Styles thing? Is it the
No,
Harry? Okay,
no, no,
okay.
no. No, no, no. Although I think that was perfect casting. He is
Look,
great. He is.
After going to a Harry Styles concert, I'm all for it. I get it now. I get the love for Harry Styles. At first, I was like, okay, he makes good solo music. Now, yes, all for it. I'm all on the Harry Styles train.
Yep. Yonel, I'm sorry if this got spoiled for you, but yes, Harry Styles is Eros, and
I mean, I
Patton
didn't
Os-
say who he was. You're the one who ruined that just now.
Oh, no.
and Patton Oswalt is Pip the Troll, which I love Pip
What?
the Troll. He's a great character.
That I didn't know about. I didn't know about Patton Oswalt, but
I didn't know
I
Pit
just-
the Troll.
I just briefly mentioned Harry Styles. I didn't say where he fell into it. Okay, but so we're talking about Spider-Man because of the nostalgia factor, because MCU is definitely playing on our millennial love for nostalgia. I would say, like, just even with the beginning, when the movie starts, I loved seeing the spider webs in the credits.
Oh, and
Me
that
too.
score is incredible. The
Danny
Oh my
Elfman,
goodness.
amazing. I think that Danny Elfman was perfect for it because he doesn't play too much on what made him popular with Danny Elfman, but there's enough whimsy in there because there is some whimsy in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You want to be flying among the skyscrapers with him. So you get a little of that, like, doodaloo, 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 but not too much.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, this is the first time you see that comic book opening with the flipping of the pages.
Right.
This was the first movie to do that.
I feel like then it was more special.
Yeah.
And
Now it's like, okay.
I would say that honestly, I think after rewatching this, one, I will steal this quote from somebody else who talked about this movie. I think this might be one of the most pure adaptations of a comic book to film ever. Like, it is pure, like,
Totally.
camp, comic booky.
Yeah.
And second, like, rewatching it, there's a lot of this that clearly set the foundation for the MCU. Like, everything that works in this does get carried over as the template for, like, all modern superhero movies.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what
Absolutely.
I definitely think that what I like about this Spider-Man and what I like about, like, pre-MCU movies is there's no pressure to make it dark and quote-unquote realistic. It is like, okay, here's Queens, but then also here's Willem De Foe running around in this, like, spandex latex green suit. And they still play into the sort of, like, silliness of seeing these grown men run around in spandex outfits.
That's right.
But at the same time, it's really fun.
It's
It's
so
It's
really-
fun.
so much fun. Also,
It doesn't look stupid.
fun fact about Willem Dafoe. Did you know that for this movie, he had dentures put in?
Oh, that's interesting.
Really?
But he only wears the dentures when he's Osborn. When he starts to become the Goblin, he doesn't wear the dentures, and his teeth look more like that was a choice by him. And he steals the show, honestly.
I mean, Willem Dafoe is amazing.
Oh my
yes,
god.
he is one of the best. Oh
Like,
my gosh, that voice that he
the
puts on as
voice.
Green Goblin. Oh my goodness.
I can't imagine this role being for anybody else. You know? I mean, his voice as he's, like, turning into the Green Goblin, like, that scene where he's having the conversation with himself is just so good, and I just feel like Willem Dafoe is the only one who is capable of making that feel real.
Yeah.
And scary.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why, like, he was chosen for Ryuk for Death Note. That movie is an absolute disaster, but the one, like, truly good thing that came out of it was, and also Lakeith Stanfield as L.
Yeah.
But, like, Willem Dafoe as Ryuk, I think solely comes from his work as Green Goblin.
Oh yeah. Well, even like you see it in The Lighthouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he pulls out that crazy performance. Lighthouse is a
Mhm.
great but wild movie. I don't know if I
Yeah.
can recommend it to you, Courtney. Actually,
I've
Courtney,
heard
I
enough
recommend-
about what happens in it. I do like Robert Pattinson.
I recommend. I'm gonna recommend Lighthouse to you, Courtney.
I don't, maybe.
You watch Tetsuo the Iron Man. It's like
I did,
that.
I watched Tetsuo the Iron Man.
So, Yonel, for context, have you ever heard of Tetsuo the Iron Man?
No.
It is a very, very good but kind of disturbing movie about
It's a 1980s Japanese horror short film.
And it's one of those movies that is put on iceberg lists of most disturbing movies. It's like a tier 3, which is like where Martyrs and 150 Days of Sodom, like movies like that,
Some
belong
really
on
dark, twisted stuff.
Oh boy.
And Courtney's like, I don't like horror movies. And then she's like, so I decided to watch Tetsuo the Iron Man. I'm like, what?
It's got a lot of stop motion in it.
You skipped 2 tiers. You went straight from no horror movies to tier 3.
I mean, it's a lot of aluminum foil. It's not that bad. You know what's crazy though about like PTSD is like I was just watching Real Housewives last night and I still found a way for that to translate into a nightmare last night. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. Because like one of the housewives, I was watching Real Housewives of Potomac, which is definitely the best crew. And one of them has a medical issue that I have. And she was like, if it doesn't get fixed, I'll need surgery. And I was like, uh-oh. So I had this nightmare that I needed surgery and I don't have health insurance. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I also often have nightmares about like, what would happen if I had to take my cats outside? How would I keep them contained? So I dreamt that I had to go to the hospital and have surgery, but also the cats were coming with me. So,
oh wow.
You know, it just goes to show you
Intense.
that like Tetsuo could do nothing, but Real Housewives of Potomac could do some damage too.
Make you think of different scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, so my thing with Willem De Foe as Norman Osborn is you know, they show him in the facility and he takes the green stuff and he like performs the procedure on himself because he is desperate to get some income and get some funding for his research. And then he kills the doctor that's helping him. And everyone the next day is like, oh my God, he's dead. Nobody knows what happened. In a facility that requires that much funding from the government, you'd have cameras in that bitch.
Exactly. I was thinking about that too, because it's just like, this is a government contract. This is super serious. This is like, as if they were like, what do you call it? Like Boeing or any of those government contracts. Like they dot their I's and cross all their T's. There would be cameras up the wazoo in that facility, whether or not Norman is actually the CEO or a board member. So that was something I did notice as well.
If anything, they could. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, talking about that, in that scene, that was a little like, I wouldn't say jarring, but just like, okay, it didn't take me out of it. Mm-hmm. It made it seem like a soundstage. Was the fact that I'm like, oh, okay, them meeting the generals, it doesn't look official enough. And I don't know, maybe it's because we're older now, we see this more on television. It seemed like, it didn't seem like, wow, like this is definitely a big serious thing. There should be a lot of people here who need to sign off on this thing. And just having a few people just there from the army, I was like, okay, this kind of takes me out. It's not really realistic, but at the same time, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like, it doesn't really have to be. I mean, I got the point of what they're trying to do. It's a government contract. It's really important. They have to get this signed off. But it was something that just like, you know, like, oh, there'll be a lot more people here. There won't be just like 5 people here.
That is like a top tier security system conversation about like creating weaponry and these like I don't know what you would call it, but like sort of like natural, like enhancing, these like body enhancing experiments that they're working on. You wouldn't just have all of those officials just walking around. You would have like a secluded meeting where only like 2 or 3 of like the top executives are involved in the conversation, because like a lot of scientists in that scenario know so little. Like they are only clear of their own objective and that's about it. Yeah.
Also, in reality, that scientist would not be speaking up to.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, ooh, he's gonna get fired.
If anything, he would have like a PowerPoint presentation in a conference room, and then he'd be out.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I wanted to point out, speaking of like the government funding and like the government putting pressure, like you better have this thing ready, or Norman Osborn. They go to the competitor who builds like a capsule rocket.
Right.
What is that?
Yeah, I
That-
noticed that too. How's that practical?
Elon Musk is somewhere being like, they made a capsule rocket?
Like that?
I noticed that too.
Like that was so. I'm watching that thing, and I'm like, this is what you're opting for. And I think it might be like, I don't know if that's deliberate comedy on Sam Raimi's part. He is kind of like, he has humor like that. Because then that's when Willem De Foe just rides in and blows that shit up.
I don't know, the capsule rocket also sort of reminded me of Paul Giamatti as the Rhino. So then I started looking up the Rhino, and then I'm like, they just made him not scary because, one, I just don't think Paul Giamatti is meant to be a Marvel villain. I think he's amazing. I just don't think that was like the right fit for him. But it sort of just triggered me into thinking of like Paul Giamatti in the Rhino suit. And then I'm like, oh, nope, those people are all dead now.
Oh boy.
He kills so many people in this movie. Sorry, Yonel.
Yeah. No. It just he just straight up murders them. But I think one of the greatest things is that I don't know. Maybe it was I don't know if you call it the cinematography or the framing of it. You just hear that laughter, which I was like, even as a kid, I was like, yo, this is kind of dope. You hear laughter, and then then you see the pumpkin bomb, and it's just like that is so powerful to me because it was just like, yo, this guy is legit like terrifying. You don't know when he's gonna come out and just fuck shit up. Like this, that was a great scene where it's just like, ha ha ha, ha, and all of a sudden you see that pumpkin bomb, and you see the general scream his lungs out basically when he bombs the bunker.
I mean, this movie conditioned an entire generation of children to just be like, yeah, crazy Willem Dafoe. I can fuck with that.
Oh my god, yeah.
But for me, it was also exciting to see like the scene at Columbia University, just because like I love the steps of Columbia University. But there's also like a lot of like memorable New York scenery, like Times Square and the Met, and I loved seeing Macy Gray. Like that felt like the most 2000s thing about this movie was that Macy Gray was performing.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Also, I would say as a kid, I definitely had no idea who Bruce Campbell was. Did you know who Bruce Campbell was by the time that you saw this movie, Tom?
By the time the third movie came out, I knew.
Okay.
And I was like, there is this theory, and I think Yonel definitely knows this theory, that because obviously if the fourth movie were to have happened, Bruce Campbell was going to be Mysterio.
Right.
So the theory goes to say that he was Mysterio the whole time, just kind of slowly influencing Spider-Man's journey.
Huh.
Which we gotta talk about that wrestling scene. I fucking love that wrestling scene.
Let's talk about the wrestling scene.
Bonesaw!
Bonesaw!
Freak show, you ain't going nowhere. I memorized that line. It was so great. Great.
I forgot about the guy who's leaving as the human spider when he is entering, and he's just like, "Oh, my legs!
Give me my legs!"
I also do want to mention, I couldn't remember it verbatim, but once he said it, I remembered the not cool joke that hasn't aged well about like, did your husband make that outfit? If he did have a husband who made him that outfit, that was a very nice gesture. It is a beautiful wrestling costume.
It's amazing.
Also,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I have to say, I did hear this in like following up on other people who've talked about this movie. A point gets brought up because when it becomes a cage match, Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire starts to panic. Goes, I didn't know it was going to be a cage match, and it's like, you're Spider-Man. Like that would be the optimal scenario for you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was confused by that too. But what I also thought was funny was, as a kid who did not watch any wrestling, the scene made complete sense to me. I was like, yeah, sure, underground wrestling. And now as a grown-up, I'm like, what is going on here? What is the vibe? What is the demographic? There's a lot of people attending this thing.
Exactly.
Is it legitimate wrestling? Because then it would be fake and these people wouldn't be in pain, but there's a lot of people here if this is an underground situation. It did make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I was looking, I'm like, if there were this many people here, this would be sponsored by WWE or something.
Yeah.
This is way too legit for something like this to be just merely
like an underground fighting ring. Yeah,
exactly. Like a place where people are actually getting hurt, and offering that much money, but apparently not, and that's why the person gets away.
Yes.
Octavia Spencer did give them that what do you call it, waiver warning.
That's true.
Yeah.
Also, something I've noticed that's unique to only this version of Spider-Man. Everybody seems to hate Peter Parker. Like, everybody. Because even in like, you were talking about earlier, the Ultimate version, in those books, he has friends.
Yeah.
And then, like, in the new movies, like, he has his best friend Ned. He has even in the Andrew Garfield one, like, he's not a nerd so much as he's like the angsty kid that that the bullies pick on. But
yeah, he's just kind of a dork.
In this movie, like, the entire city of New York hates Peter Parker.
Beginning from that scene where he finally catches up with the bus, and it's just like you see everyone's reaction to him getting on the bus and potentially sitting next to him, and you can see all the students who are just like, "Oh no, get away from me!"
It's because they don't want to sit next to a 30-year-old man.
Even his best friend is like a scumbag.
I know, when they're at the Columbia University tour and they're talking about the spiders, and then he uses that line, I'm like, that's a douche move. What about like bro code? Like, your best friend's been in love with her for forever. I think I forgot that was such a heavy component in this story, was like the love triangle rom-com aspect of it. They definitely lay it on very, very thick.
Yes.
With this trilogy.
I think that, honestly, this is my personal thing, and we can talk about when we get to Spider-Man 2, but that I don't buy the relationship so much in this one. The second one, I think, is a little better. But, like, I think they play their roles really well when they're not in the same room together.
Do you mean, like, specifically, I was going to say Peter Maguire. Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire and Kristen Dunst, yes.
That's funny because they did date in real life.
That's true, they did date.
Every Peter Parker, I almost said Peter Pan that time. Now I don't know what's happening. My brain is frying. Every Peter Parker and every leading lady, whether it's MJ or Gwen Stacy, has dated each other.
Oh, it's true.
Yeah. Maybe it's all those like high-flying stunts. You're just holding that person tight all the time.
It's the power of Spider-Man.
No, I thought that they were quite believable. I didn't believe in any of the chemistry between James Franco and Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, that was very... like, how would these two even be a couple post high school?
Yeah, like the scene where he leans in to kiss her and she has that like really uncomfortably chinoiserie outfit on, and he just like ends up kissing her cheek. It's like, dude, you gotta pull the brakes here. Don't keep going in after she's turned away from you. That I felt like was uncomfortable. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, like, not trying to be mean, but out of all of them, James Franco is kind of the weakest actor in these films.
Well, yeah, because this was like his first big film.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I know that he actually was up. He was originally up for Spider-Man.
Well, that's why he cast him as Harry, right?
Yeah. I remember it was obviously a connection with Judd Apatow and Sam Raimi.
Mm-hmm.
There was just like this connection of like, oh, we like this guy. We want him in this movie. But he gets so outperformed, especially in the second movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even when he catches Peter and MJ like holding hands at the hospital, and then
Yeah.
he just immediately goes home and is like, "Daddy, she doesn't love me." I'm just like,
Yeah.
"You son of a bitch, this is your fault."
And
Exactly.
doesn't Norman give him like that weird speech? Like,
He does.
yeah. But that's also the Green Goblin, so he's meant to be the bad guy.
Yeah, but it's just funny because he's like, "I haven't been there for you before, but I'm going to be now. I'm gonna kill your ex-girlfriend." It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That went from 0 to 100 real quick. But I do really love this movie. There is something that the plot just makes a lot of sense to me, and I feel like they set it up in a very pragmatic, logistical way. It's like, okay, he gets bit. He realizes he can do some cool shit. And then he realizes, like, okay, I need a car to impress MJ. Forget the fact that he has powers and he can take her swinging.
Yeah.
You know, he could do his whole version of a whole new world with her, but instead he's like, I gotta get a car. And then that leads him to the wrestling match. And then that's what leads us to the moment that nobody ever needs to see again, ever, which is Uncle Ben dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's a meme at this point.
Yeah.
Because we've seen it a lot. We haven't seen it nearly as much as Batman's parents dying.
No, that
Martha! Martha, no!
But
Right, okay.
this movie kind of does it so perfectly. Like that moment, like before, like when they're sitting in the car, Peter's being sort of an asshole, and his uncle is just like, he gives him the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech.
I mean, that's still
And,
a great line.
It's
Yeah.
such a great line. And then like I felt the genuine pain when you know, Tobey Maguire kind of just brushes him off.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
see Uncle Ben, you see him sit with that pain because he
Yeah.
loves him so much. And it was,
Like, you're not my father. Yeah.
oh my God, that hits so hard.
I know.
But that's what works, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
where we get the pivotal motivation. Like, this dumb kid witnesses the consequences of his negligence and is like, I have to do something about this.
I wanted to yell at Tobey Maguire in that moment because I'm like, you do not talk to the man who raised you like that, okay?
Yeah.
You do not talk to your Uncle Ben like that.
He was a complete and utter asshole.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. It was just like, dude, why are you like, you let him down? You were supposed to help him paint the house, right? Or paint the kitchen. And you just been MIA. And I know he's a teenager, he's supposed to play a teenager, but it was just like, you didn't have to go that hard. And you know that he immediately regrets saying it when he like when Uncle Ben goes back to holding the wheel and he's just like pausing for a second before he exits out of the car. But I was just like, damn, you didn't have to go that hard.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of those moments that when I saw it in the movie theater, I just looked at my dad and I'd be like, I would not talk to you like that. Just a heads up. That guy's a dick.
He doesn't represent us as teenagers. He doesn't represent us.
Yeah. We are a spectrum as teenagers. But that's what's sad too, is like, it is a dick move, but you could still see how it happens.
Right.
I love that they retconned what happens with the thief in Spider-Man 3. I mean, at that point, Sam Raimi is just like, let's just burn this shit down to the ground.
That was,
Yeah.
that broke my heart.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And I know that Martin Sheen plays Uncle Ben in the Andrew Garfield version. And this actor, I haven't seen him in the same way that, like, we all know who Martin Sheen is. Martin Sheen is, like, to me, like, one of the great actors. But there's something still that is just more powerful and more memorable about this actor playing
Yeah.
Uncle Ben.
His name is
Yeah.
Cliff Robertson.
Right.
I think what the Garfield movies did was they didn't really focus on Uncle Ben that much.
The
compared
Garfield
to-
movies, the cat movies did not focus on Uncle Ben too much.
Andrew Garfield, we know
I knew what you meant, but I couldn't help but picture it in my head.
So what like, I know that, what was the speech in the Garfield one? Like he gave
don't
like
remember.
a knock. Like
Man, neither do I. But
like
They-
something
they
about
seem-
responsibility and being accountable as a young man or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
it's
okay,
definitely
just
like
say
a
the
dollar
line.
store version of this.
exactly, and
Yeah.
it's just like they focused more on his relationship with his father more than I guess the
Oh, that
relationship with Uncle
weird
Ben. And
plot.
I was just like, I was
Yeah,
just
that
like,
plot is so janky.
yeah, I was just like, okay, so it kind of takes the power away from what Uncle Ben says to him.
Right. It's like they try to add this explanation for why his parents died, and like, sure, fine, I get wanting to add a deeper context to dead parents in any superhero Disney princess origin. Um, but then it does make you feel less attached to Uncle Ben because you're like, well, he has parents. In this one, you
Yeah.
feel that these people have raised him.
Oh yeah.
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 And what's this is like generally a thing with the character. I think his parents are supposed to be undercover shield agents or whatever.
Okay.
And I, even as a kid, I'm like, okay, it's kind of dumb, right? Because Spider-Man's supposed to be relatable, and having parents that are secret agents for one of the top secret organizations in the world doesn't really. It kind of takes away from that.
Does that
I
not do it
mean,
for you, Yonel?
no, I'm just like, okay, so like, why? Okay, if they're shield agents, why isn't their kid more like protected or so? I don't know. It was just
Yeah.
seemed really weird to me, even in the comic books. But and that's one of the things I liked about Ultimate Spider-Man. They kind of retconned it to where his father was just like a scientist, so that's where Peter got his science inclination. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I always felt that was so weird. I'm like, what?
Yeah. I think that's my issue with Iron Man helping Spider-Man too in the Tom Holland version, is it like it takes away the just every average day Spider-Man feel to it if he has
Yeah.
like the support and like benefactor of Tony Stark. Whereas like I do think Tobey Maguire does give off, although he's like 40 and 12 at the same time, he does give off that feeling that he could just be like an average kid from Queens.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about the guy that we have to talk about the legend, J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh yes.
J.K.
Yes.
Simmons.
J.K.
Great.
Simmons.
The best.
Great
Like, there's
casting.
no other man could be this role.
Have either of you seen Juno?
Yes.
A long time ago. I don't
Okay.
remember.
That was the moment where I was like, oh my god, J.K. Simmons is such a good actor. And that was like before Whiplash came out, when he like really became an A-list celebrity. So it's really funny going back and seeing him in this. And, he's just so cartoony. He's so great.
It's so great. He pulls off the character so much. You know what's crazy? When I watched the bootleg, and I'll never forget this, you could hear people clapping in the movie theater when he shows up, because I think it was universally thought this was perfect casting for J. Jonah Jameson.
He's so great.
Eddie's been on it for weeks. We can barely get a glimpse of him.
Oh, what is he, shy? If we can get a picture of Julia Roberts in a thong, we can certainly get a picture of this weirdo. Put an ad on the front page. Cash money for a picture of Spider-Man. He doesn't want to be famous, and I'll make him infamous.
Oh my god.
So
And
beautiful.
perfect casting, and I love every moment of screen of him, because he's just this absolute asshole.
Yeah.
Like, he's ripping. He's like,
He's
that's
definitely-
outrageous.
He's definitely a libertarian.
$300, that's outrageous. Here's a check. But I will say a moment that I love with him, and I actually texted Courtney about this.
Mhm.
I love the moment when he like laughs off Peter Parker, but then
Mhm.
he chucks a cigar out the window,
Yeah.
and then the Green Goblin tosses it back in. Like, I noticed it now. I'm like, why would you do that?
Why would you
And
do
then-
that?
But then the Green Goblin storms into the office. He's looking for the photographer who took the Spider-Man photos. And I told Courtney, I'm like, I think this is a deliberate choice. We see some true, respect and humanity in this man. Because he could have very easily just said, there he is, Peter Parker. But
Right.
J. Jonah Jameson, he's like,
Jameson.
he's like, I don't know him. He just drops them off.
Yeah, it
And
comes
that
in
was
the
a
mail
fr-
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a really true moment for a character.
I'm glad you texted me about that, because when I was watching it, I was also folding laundry. And I didn't really pay close attention to that interaction. And at the time I was like, oh, there's like this disconnect between that scene and the previous scene where he's yelling at Peter Parker and is like, I'm only going to give you $200, $300. But when we talked it out, I was like, oh, that does make sense. That there's like a moment of growth for our guy, Jonah Jameson, when he says like, oh, I don't know him. He just sends them in the mail, and we send him a check, and that's it.
There's this excellent meme of it's like a 2-panel meme where the first one is like Joker saying like people reveal themselves when they're about to die or when they think they're about to die. It's from The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the next scene, and the next panel is that scene where Robin's holding him by the neck and saying like, "Oh, this just comes by the mail." And I'm like, yeah, that was such a great and pivotal scene of growth because it's like he comes off as a complete, almost like one-dimensional cartoon, like you mentioned. But then it's just like he's doing everything he can, or as much as he can, to protect Peter from this monster. So I thought that was really, to your point, it's a really cool scene.
And Elizabeth Banks is his assistant.
I know, right?
She looks so young there.
I had a crush on her when I saw that.
Oh, really? Oh,
you had a crush on her when I was a kid. I was like, she's beautiful.
I mean, she is beautiful.
Yeah.
But then we also have Sam Raimi's brother, Ted Raimi, playing in the role. He's, I think he's one of the, I don't know if he's like one of the writers or he's an assistant, but he always popping his head in and out. He's very recognizable. When you see him, you're like, oh, I've seen this guy in every movie Sam Raimi's ever made.
I love
I saw him?
fictional newspaper office scenes. Because they're always like, hey, you, get the front page and this. And then like people are like running around. Like I don't think that exists anymore because we don't put as much intention into newspapers. I think that like the desire to create headlines still exists in the internet world. But I feel like that's something that I love about movies that people aren't going to keep doing is this sort of like fast pace, old timey, like, hey, you, I put the ad in there for 3/4 of a page. So they do capture that really wonderfully in this movie. I don't know about you guys, but I had the anticipation that I was going to hate all of the graphics in this movie, but I feel like the glider was still, there were like a lot of effects that I feel like was done really well, and the sound of that glider was like music to my ears. It was so cathartic. Just like, oh, so good.
Because a lot of it was so practical, like Sam Raimi pulling off his camera tricks. Like I remember there was a scene where like there was a police car that was held up by webs, and that was like a real car. Like it just felt a lot of gravity to the effects.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is still valuable about practical effects, that you just can't, no matter how good the CGI budget is, no matter how current the CGI budget is, there is like a weight and a physicality to practical effects that you just can't duplicate.
Yeah. Well, even in this movie, they developed a new camera trick where, you know how like when you watch a sport game, like a sporting event, the camera is on like these wires and it glides across the field?
Mm-hmm.
They kind of started that with this movie. In this movie, they took like cables and would stretch them across buildings and would have the camera glide across.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then a composite shot of Spider-Man into that scene to create that like kind of webbing effect of like going through the buildings. It was really well done.
That's awesome.
One of the things that definitely bothered me as a kid that my dad and I would discuss like in the movie theater that is different from the original is that the webs come from his wrists.
Oh God! All right, we need to talk about this.
Okay.
What's everybody's take on the organic web shooters?
I'm fine with it personally. I think it's a great idea. I just think, like, viscerally, as a child who was very squeamish, this bothered me very much. And I just thought of, like, my veins. And I would, like, keep holding my wrists when I watched it. But I remember, like, watching the cartoons and being like, he has cartridges. What do you guys think?
For me, like you, I thought it was a great idea. And I've heard people talk about this before. It's just like, how is this high school kid going to create this completely new organic like web fluid that he constantly has to constantly replace and everything? For me, I always found it like kind of ridiculous. I accepted it as a character, but when Sam Raimi made the decision to like make it organic from his wrist. And you're right, it was a little weird, just like, oh, like you end up looking at your wrist
Yeah.
for whatever reason as like a reaction to it. But I thought it was kind of smart, and I think in Spider-Man 2, you even see them not working. So it kind of, it's not like it completely moves away from like how imperfect the web shooters are from the comic books. But it also makes sense because like how would this kid be able to do this? If this kid is so broke, why is he having
Yeah.
creating this like these web shooters like that can do such amazing stuff? Like people can use this for science and everything. So I personally thought it was a good idea.
Yonel, you had
Mm-hmm.
mentioned like the Joker and its like relation to like
Okay.
how people respond when they're about to die. I feel like Green Goblin does have sort of a similar manifesto or belief
Sure.
that,
It's
we
okay.
choose our destinies, and like he has a lot of logical thinking behind his insanity, which is really interesting to me.
For me, I think overall Green Goblin is I don't know, he's an underrated or underutilized villain for Spider-Man. I think he is the worst. Like he is like his Joker, right? And in the movies, there's only been I'm actually surprised there's only been one interpretation of him, William Defoe. And I know it's very hard to replicate, but him being utilized, and even in the comic books, he's not as utilized as he used to be, especially in the 70s and 80s. And for me, I thought that he is like him more than anyone else knows Spider-Man's identity, his personal life, right? And could really mess things up for Peter. So seeing him not used that much is always like you have this great character that's on like almost on the level of Joker as far as just like a bringer of chaos, and he's kind of unutilized. Now, at the same time, they did such an amazing job with Doc Ock, who is kind of on the same level as Green Goblin. Yeah, he's just like he's a personal villain for Peter as well, right? For me, the best villains are the ones that know Spider-Man and know Peter. So it kind of balances out. But I always feel like like Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, that whole relationship with his son and like how they know each other and how personal it is something that's not as utilized as much. And I'm excited for what could be in No Way Home. Uh, but at the same time, I would have loved to see the MCU's interpretation of Green Goblin if they were going to introduce him.
But like I was saying, like so what you were saying, like with these villains, like they represent kind of an antithesis to what's going on with Peter Parker. Like Green Goblin has this amazing power and gift, and he, like Peter, has been kind of put in this situation of like shame and everything taken away from him. So he utilizes his power for vengeance, and he like that's why he propositioned Spider-Man to join him. But despite that, he's like, no, Spider-Man, because of the actions of he saw the consequences of his actions. He saw what happens when he takes things for granted. His family gets hurt, and that's what's beautiful about these villains and why they're so compelling.
I think that, we talked about how, like, this is sort of his Joker. And I do wholeheartedly believe that. And I think having Willem Dafoe play the Green Goblin as well as he does definitely lays that foundation. So I'm surprised to hear that he's underutilized. I do think that when you have somebody like Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin or Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, it's so hard to have somebody else fill those shoes. Like when they embody the persona so much, it's impossible to find somebody else who can play that role. I mean, even at this point, I feel like with Catherine Hahn as Agatha, like who could be Agatha at this point, you know? But I feel like, in a lot of Marvel movies now, the villain has like the exact same qualities and powers as our hero, whereas I feel like the best villains for me personally are the ones who are the complete opposite, like the yin to the yang, which is why I think Batman and Joker work so well. Batman is about order and justice, and the Joker is about like chaos and pain. And I feel like Spider-Man represents like the everyday middle to lower class kid, and I feel like actually Norman's power and status as this businessman, this upper class businessman, is a part of his villainy and part of like the reason behind his insanity and his like rationale to it. He says like there are 8 billion people in New York City, or 8 million, whatever he says. And he's like, and most of them are just stepping stones for the few great ones like us. And then also, like, I think that's part of his vengeance, right? Is he built this entire organization, he pays for his son's apartment, and then as soon as they let him go, he's like, no, you can't do that to me, I deserve this. So that sort of mentality of like, I'm gonna take what's mine. So
That's extremely insightful, because I never really thought of it like that.
yeah.
Right? I always envision the Green Goblin as just, he's like a very personal villain for Peter, right? Like he makes things personal, like so becomes scary. But I never really thought about like the differences as far as like socioeconomically, where it's just like, yeah, he's a billionaire with this mentality of, I'm gonna take what I want and no fuck everyone else. Where Peter, he's like, he's for that, he's grinding essentially, and he's not really good at paying his rent and all this other stuff. So I never really, never, like, I'm actually quite flabbergasted
Thank you,
that
Yonel.
I
Thank you.
never thought about that.
And I think that's
uh,
part of his like
yeah,
judgment against MJ too, is like he kind of treats her as just like, she's this trash from Queens, like
yeah.
learn her better. And then like once she, breaks up with him, he can be like, all right, now I can kill your ex-girlfriend. He's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, this is great. That's a great point. That just actually makes me think of the character deeper. And that also kind of makes me even sadder that the character hasn't been utilized. But to your point, Willem Dafoe is the Green Goblin. I can't imagine
Totally.
I can't think of anyone that could possibly take on that character.
I don't understand.
Did you think it was coincidence? So many good things all happening for you. All for you, Norman.
What do you want?
To say what you won't. To do what you can't. To remove those in your way.
The board members. You killed them.
We killed them.
We?
Remember your little accident in the laboratory?
Performance enhancers.
Bingo. Me, your greatest creation.
Exactly. And you know what's crazy is like we're talking about these points, and like, and this is what kind of gets me really excited. Even though we haven't seen the movie yet, that theme of like him compelling Spider-Man and trying to, feed him this persona and acting as his opposite does play out in the trailer with those quotes where like he mocks Spider-Man. He's like, you're trying to grasp control, of everything, and you just can't do it. Like if that I hope they continue that theme into this movie because it makes sense to.
Yeah. And I feel like, it's really hard to give autonomy to these female roles in this point in the 2000s. So I was like trying to grasp onto anything for MJ. And I think like that sort of like classism that Norman displays like during the Thanksgiving scene, I wish that was like more of a direction that they could have gone in for her, other than just like, I want to be an actress and I think I'm in love with this person, but also I'm in love with this person, but also now I'm being kidnapped again, oh no. Is like her ability to like try to enter the sort of elitism of Broadway and fine theater from like her childhood growing up, and also like feeling independent because like clearly she's got some insecurities from her family life, and that is totally justified and expected. Of course, like I'm a feminist. I gotta throw that in there as a complaint, just a little
No,
bit, just a
I
tad bit.
I agree to a certain, even the very end where she basically professes her love to Peter. I kind of you know what, it was just like, it was cringy because in my head I'm like, you guys just graduated high school, right? Like any
Yeah.
relationship you're getting into is gonna be. It's very rare that it's just like high school sweethearts stay on, like become like close relationships. And the fact that she's saying I love you and all this stuff, and like for me, I'm like, man, if they had gone with a different line, like let's, I don't know, it wouldn't have been as powerful, but just like let's get in a relationship or let's go out, something that's like a little bit more realistic. I felt that,
Yeah.
but it also her saying that kind of took away from her character, and that's where I'm like, oh man, they did her wrong in this movie because she's kind of one note, right? And to your point, if she
Yeah.
was kind of struggling against that, or trying to, I don't know, not prove herself, but just like trying to break into that Broadway Lisa and just play around with the whole thing with class. Man, that would have been a much deeper film and made her a more three-dimensional character because, yeah, I feel like in my personal opinion, they kind of did her wrong in that.
Yeah.
Movie.
Yeah, they just sort of like toss her around like hot potato
Yeah.
of like what guy she's with in the movie at the time. I'm glad you mentioned the ending of the film because like, dude, even if you didn't date for that long and like his dad like called you out, like maybe you shouldn't be kissing his best friend at your
Yeah.
ex-boyfriend's father's funeral. Like that just seems like bad timing all around.
Yeah, it's really messed up.
It's messed up. Okay, so are we ready to ask the question? Although it seems kind of convoluted because of the Marvel universe.
Yes, I'm ready to answer this question.
Okay, Tom.
Yes.
Yonel.
Mhm.
Yes.
Do you think? Yes. Do you think this movie would be successful today as it was back then?
Do you want to take this, Yonel?
Oh, that's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in this scenario, are there the current movies out right now? Let's say they had never been created a Spider-Man movie before, and then boom, Sam Raimi was hired to do one, and this is the movie he created in the Marvel universe. Are we playing with that scenario?
Yeah.
Okay, if we're playing with
Yeah,
that,
I'm into it.
if we're playing with that scenario, I don't think it would have been received well, and I think not because I solely think because of MJ's character. I think it would be solely
that
because of
wouldn't.
Yeah.
that's what takes me out
really.
because you've had so
Yeah.
many strong female characters in these different Marvel movies that just like they're love interests, but they have three dimensional. So when you see MJ, it's just like is this like even comparing her to Zendaya's interpretation, it's like
I love Zendaya.
yeah, it's just like she's one of the most interesting characters on screen when she's on screen, and when MJ's on screen, especially is it Kirsten or Kristen?
Kirsten
Dunst. It's
Dunst,
just
yeah.
like, man, she's talented. We've seen her in other stuff before, right? And
Right.
it's just like, oh, she's so underutilized. So I don't think, I think it would be, I don't know. I don't think it would be a memorable one if it was one of the MCU movies. I think its role as being one of the first or second successful Marvel movies, it like gives it that leeway. Like it's sort of a product of the time. I don't know. What do you guys
Tom,
feel?
what do you think?
I actually am a little more optimistic, but although you are correct, there's certain things that don't age well that would need to change. But I think as a whole, like, this created the platform and the template for, like, adapting, especially Marvel comics to screen. I think even the fact that, like, if you would ask me, like, 10 years ago, I would have been like, no, it would confuse the audience. They wouldn't get it. Now, I think the audience is well aware that there's, like, different, multiple universes, and a Spider-Man cartoon like Into the Spider-Verse can do phenomenal and not be tied to the other movies at all. I think if they were to, like, let's just say, I would change the question, even if they were to, like, make Sam Raimi's, like, vision of the fourth movie, I think if they did that now, audiences are smart enough to know the difference. Like, oh, this is its own thing. It's not a part of that. It's its own thing. And I think the love for the series is so strong. I think it would do well. I don't know if this movie, now that you're now pointing out, I don't know if this movie as is would do as well today. But I think that the love for those types of Sam Raimi universe, I mean, like, they gave him Doctor Strange. Like, he's directing Doctor Strange, and I'm sure he has a hand in this Spider-Man movie because there's a lot of crossover.
Right.
That love for his style and storytelling is very much still there. So that's kind of my like yes and no answer.
Okay. I feel like what I do love about this Spider-Man more than any of the MCU movies in its entirety is I do feel like this captures the purity of like the love for Spider-Man. It captures like the essence of Spider-Man and what it's about. That being said, they'd have to change the CGI because they've got that scene where Kirsten Dunst is being flung around by mannequin Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And the wind is just like blowing in both directions. This is, I think, by far the most memeable Spider-Man. And when you guys are mentioning that, like, everybody hates Peter Parker, everybody clearly is not for Tobey Maguire either.
Yeah.
Because there's the meme of his crying face, you know. So yeah, I think that it just wouldn't exist in this world. There are definitely elements that I would love to see if Sam Raimi was the one directing, like keeping Bruce Campbell in it and like keeping the core, like pure essence of like what makes Spider-Man special. But I think that Yonel's right. I think that like, I mean, I think you both are right in the sense that like the audience is smart enough now where we could be like, oh, there's a multiverse
Right.
of Spider-Man. Yeah.
One thing I did wanted to point out is that I think what would really translate well is the fun aspect of it, because even going back to watch it, I'm like, man, this is fun. Like,
it's so fun.
Yeah, and if I got to compare it with what was the first movie, first Spider-Man movie, Homecoming? I have to say I like Tobey Maguire. Like, if the Tobey Maguire movie was replaced with that one in that timeline, I gotta say I like it a little bit more because, kind of to your point, it's like it's a more contained story, right? About a kid from Queens rather than No Way Home being about a kid from Queens who also knows one of the most successful people on the planet, and he's mentoring him and all this other stuff. So, yeah, I felt like, I think it would be able to. That would be. It's also saving grace that it's fun, it's whimsical, it's enjoyable. You kind of have to laugh.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention, you kind of have to laugh at like how pathetic they make him in the movie. I'm like, God,
he's so pathetic.
Yeah, I'm like, why does he have to? I've never been in that situation before, and I don't know anyone who has. But him chasing after the bus gets me every time. I'm like, oh God, bro, let me just get you a
take
car.
public transportation.
Yeah, like you're in the city. Get a friend. You have a rich friend. Tell him to pick you up in his car or something. I'm like, you can't. Don't do that stuff.
I do have like a really, really quick question about Homecoming.
Sure.
Do they kill Uncle Ben in Homecoming?
No.
Oh, thank God. I can't watch Uncle Ben die for a third time.
Not even in it.
They acknowledge it. They acknowledge it offhand, but I think they learned their lesson to like not beat a dead horse. Because that's the thing.
Okay.
Like Kevin Feige, because he's been on board since day one. Like he was a big hand in this Spider-Man movie. Like Kevin Feige has been involved with like all the Marvel movies, and I think that's why there is this like template of consistency that, you know, he sees what has worked before and what doesn't.
Right.
So like I think he definitely saw that people were sick of, you know, you can't recreate what was the golden standard in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. So like they don't recreate it, and I think there's some subtext to like Peter looking for that kind of mentor in a Tony Stark, and him having to learn like Tony Stark isn't my uncle. But like, yeah, they don't Batman it.
Okay, good.
Well, how do you guys feel about him not ever saying that with great power comes great responsibility? Because there's that one scene where Tony confronts him in the apartment in Captain America: Civil War, and you see him, like Tony asks him, like, "Why do you do this?" And I won't lie, there was a part of me just like, just say it. With great power comes great responsibility.
Just say it.
And then just say what the additional stuff you want to say to it, right? And it's just like, that's, for me, it's kind of like that Uncle Ben thing where it's just like, oh, we know already, right? But at the same time, I feel like, I don't know how I feel about that not being there. Like, you said, sometimes when you have these powers, like great power comes, like, introduce it naturally. I don't know. I don't know how you guys
Mm,
feel about that, but for me, I was just like, didn't we see Captain America: Civil War together, Tom? I think we
Yeah, we
did.
did.
Yeah, that's when I was just like, oh, come on, like, can we just? I just want those 4 words or 5 words. Just say it. Just say it. Just say it.
I
I
know.
I have not seen Civil War. Like really just like I gotta cherry pick which MCU movies I watch, so
Yeah.
I'm not sick of it. But yeah, I feel like, you know, those lines, with great power comes great responsibility, is such an iconic line. And, you know, there are definitely some iconic elements to this trilogy, you know, like the kiss scene. My dad would always call this like one of the most iconic kiss scenes in cinema. Even though apparently it was like freezing cold, and, you know, Tobey Maguire was getting like lighthead trying to
Yeah.
do the kissing scene upside down. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun film, and I think part of that is Sam Raimi. Like, Raimi? I feel like I'm
Raimi,
saying
yeah.
it wrong.
Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
Normally, Tom is the one screwing up names on the
I am.
podcast, but I am taking that crown today. But yeah. Should we head to our final question?
Yes.
Okay. Tom, Yonel, what have you guys been obsessed with? Usually it's weekly obsessions, but, you know, we've had a month.
Yeah.
So, you know, just what have you guys been obsessed with this past month? What have you been up to? What have you been doing? How's it going?
Christmas shopping.
Oh no, already?
Well, it's like this will be out in December.
Oh, good point. Good point.
What have I been obsessed with? Oh, bro, like I can't get into. There's one thing I'm obsessed with. It's a video game, and I think about it like a lot. Right?
What video game?
It's called. Don't judge me. City Skylines. It's kind of like you create your own city. Essentially, that's what you're doing, right? And
Oh, cool.
and it's just like, you know, my dad's an engineer and he's into infrastructure and all this other stuff. So me doing it, I spend hours upon hours. Like, I literally brought my PlayStation 4 from home all the way to Janelle's place
Amazing.
just to play it. And I could spend. You guys have no idea. It's like a weird obsession. I literally have to step away from it. But for me, I'm like, how can I make this road better so that people can actually walk on it? But also, how can I create a metro system so I can make some money? Like, how can I make this better
Oh my
than
God,
the MD?
amazing.
Yeah, it's just it becomes an obsession of mine. And my brother-in-law, he plays the game, and then I got into a full-blown conversation, and it very quickly realized, like, he's like, dude, I don't know that much. I'm like, okay, I can't show everyone the whole thing about City Skylines, you know, I can't show everyone that side of me. Not everyone's ready for it, but yeah, that's what I've been obsessing with recently.
They don't know me like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, okay, you gotta dial it back, you know, dial it back. Abort.
I mean, I've been doing the same thing in Animal Crossing.
Really?
I'm like terraforming and like, okay, this needs a path, and like there can't be this much open space, so this should be here, and like people will like custom build designs for like roads and pathways, and they'll make like lace to make it look like there's a lace blanket on the ground. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I got it on my PS4 and I got it for my laptop because I wanted to play with the mods. And it's just really bad, guys. But Janelle was my girlfriend. She was mentioning like I could kind of appreciate how he just gets really into it and tries to figure out how can I make these people's lives better? How can I increase the education of all these people, but also so they can easily get to work, and if they want to work in the industry, yeah, it's also kind of a little bit like capitalist where I'm just like, I need to find out a way to make money sometimes. Like I need, like, the city is constantly in debt. We can't be $3 million in debt. This is not sustainable. But yeah, that's what I've been like obsessing over the past month, and if I'm gonna be honest, the past few months, because it is a great way to unwind after a pretty stressful time.
That is amazing.
Yeah, I can geek out about it all day. I'm gonna spare you guys that.
Well, my obsession has been I started my Etsy account.
Ooh, congratulations.
Woo! People can now buy my prints, and I will be by the time this episode comes out, I will be announcing like handmade earrings.
Yay!
Yay! So if you are interested in giving your loved ones some unique art or handmade jewelry, you can go to Demure and Dangerous on Etsy. It's kind of like a play on the expectations and standards that we put on women. So that's why I called it Demure and Dangerous.
Nice. Send me that link.
Okay.
All right. Do you want me to wrap it up here, guys?
Sure.
I also have to really run to the bathroom. Sorry.
I've been like spinning in my chair for a while now.
All right. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back. We love it. We're here.
Yeah.
And also welcome, Yonel. Thank you so
you.
much for joining us.
No, pleasure was mine. Thank you for having me.
You will be joining us for 2 and 3 too?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, I'd love to. Yeah.
Let's do the whole trilogy.
I want to go back to the entire trilogy. So I'm definitely down to talk more about it.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. But with that, folks, be sure to follow us on the Instagram at Remember the 00S Podcast. And if you want to listen to us, just type us into Google. We're on Spotify, Google.
Bam.
Bam. Amazon.
Bam.
Bam.
Bam. Bam. Bam.
YouTube. We're on YouTube.
We are on YouTube sometimes.
Sometimes when we don't get copy strikes.
Yeah.
Really?
YouTube, damn you.
Tom likes to play on the wild side and add some audio that YouTube does not like. Yeah.
YouTube gets very mad, even though it's within respectable,
confines.
Terms.
Yeah.
I know the rules, but sometimes some companies are pickier than others. But yeah, that's all, folks. Thank you so much. Enjoy the holiday season and get ready for more Spider-Man.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
They're crap. Mega crap. I'll give you $200 for all of them.
That seems a little low.
Take them somewhere else then. Sit down. Give me that. I'll give you $300. That's a standard freelance fee. Tear up page 1, run that photo instead.
Headline?
Spider-Man, hero or menace? Exclusive Daily Bugle photos.
Menace. He was protecting that armor.
I'll tell you what, Atticus, you take the pictures, I'll make up the headlines, okay? All right? That okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Goody.
I'd like a job, sir.
No jobs. Freelance. Best thing in the world for a kid your age.